Hello everyone and welcome to Writing Quest. My name is Brendan Pugh. And in today's episode we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of writers struggle with, which is being unique. Here we go. Huzzah! Today's episode, we're talking about not worrying about being unique. What do I mean by that? Well, because, there's a lot of stuff out there about, you don't want to rip off someone's work. You don't want to do all that stuff. You don't want to write something that is exactly like a story that you know. But truth be told, we know this. How many more stories can we tell that are truly, completely 100% unique? So many stories have been written. So many movies have been made. So many TV shows have been done. There's really no way to truly make something completely unique. How do you go about this? What do you do in a world that is so saturated by so many different types of stories? So we're going to kind of go through my process and how I started coming up with my own stories in ways that can pay tribute to the things you love, but be as unique as possible in your own way. Here we go. Starting with what you know and then picking multiple elements that intrigue you. What do I mean by that? So when I first started coming up with my world, I was working in a factory on an assembly line, and I, had a lot of time. My brain wasn't very engaged because I was just doing kind of the same old for 8 hours a day. And so I basically just started to have these thoughts of what would happen if you crossed Avatar: The Last Airbender with Jedi? And then what if those Jedi also rode dragons? But dragons are kind of overdone. What if the dragons were wolves? And that's kind of where the whole thing started for me. What if you took a Jedi who has the powers of Avatar: The Last Airbender who rides a wolf? And then what if the wolf had wings? Basically what I did was I took a bunch of elements that I really liked, stories that I liked, and you just start kind of combining them together and figuring that out, which leads into the next thing. What happens when you smash all that stuff together? So if you take a bunch of elements that you like, you take different story and plot ideas, you take different characterizations, you take different world building elements like dragons or wolves, magic, like all these different things. And then what does it actually look like when those things just smash together? So I ended up coming up with this idea that I wanted kind of the Jedi figures that are the protectors and guardians of the world that my story is set in, but I didn't want them to just kind of use the Force. So that's where the, Avatar: The Last Airbender, well, what if they could control the elements? That'd be cool. And then I thought, well, dragons are kind of overdone, so let's do wolves. Wolves are awesome. I really like wolves. I've always liked wolves. And then what if the wolves had wings? So it's still kind of got the dragon feel where they can fly, but it's wolves with wings. That seems like something that hasn't been done a whole lot before. And so then it just started becoming this whole how can I build a mythology around this? How can I build kind of a new, unique twist on things? And same with, I have elves and dwarves and goblins and orcs, and all of those things are in my story. Classic high fantasy stuff that you've seen a lot. We've seen all over the place. So the question is, and I think Brandon Sanderson talks a lot about this in one of his lecture series, but the question is, how do you make those be something that is familiar? Because it's hard to completely change it to something that is, it's kind of like if you take something like vampires or werewolves, and if you change it too much, people have such a firm vision of what those things are in their mind that it's hard for them to leave and kind of divorce themselves from that. So it was kind of I have those elements, but I'm kind of, how did they come about in my world? What are the small little differences? How are they, separate? They're obviously the same as what's been done before, but then how are they separated from, the things that we know, and kind of put my own unique twist on it that fits in my world? So kind of just to reiterate again, you take those elements that you know really well that are not unique. And then when you put them all together and then you add your world on top of it, and then you kind of start tweaking your magic system and you add all those layers, that's what changes it to be your own unique spin. So it starts off as something that's not unique, and then it builds itself into being unique. That's kind of what I mean by don't worry about being unique and kind of creating something brand new from the start, because you really, especially for me as someone who was an amateur author, really amateur to start, I'd never written anything before, and now still being someone who's trying to learn and grow, that was something that was like, I need to start with something familiar that I can then change to my own purposes. And over the last few years, that's really what's happened, where I feel like I started off with something that was very derivative, and now I'm definitely sitting in a camp that's more unique and more my own version, but definitely harkens back to and kind of, is still true to the things that it came from without being the things that it came from. That's essentially what we're going. And then really, that that kind of wraps up the last part of it, which is breaking the mold. How do you take what you have, break the mold so that it's unique and people go, hey, that's something I recognize, but that's kind of a cool twist on it. You don't want to obviously just rip things off completely. I've heard that there's a few fantasy authors out there that I won't name names, but you guys probably know the stories of authors who basically just straight up steal exactly what the story is. And, it's a fine line, because you can't, it's hard to, the hero journey is the hero journey. The 3-act structure is the 3-act structure. There's only so much. The reason those are so used and universal and beloved is because they work really well. So it's kind of like you can't get away from it fully, but you also don't want to just completely rip off another author's story. So that's kind of the trick. That's kind of the what do you do and how do you kind of strike that balance with your own story. So let me know in the comments below if you have any other tips and ideas about how you work on being unique, because obviously we can't be 100% brand new, but we can definitely kind of have a love letter to the things we love and the things that have come before with our own unique spin. Let me know what you think about that. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, and we'll see you next time on Writing Quest. Huzzah!